AI is taking over the world. Wait, hold up. AI can't even solve my calculus homework. How is it going to take over the world? AI is becoming more advanced every day, and it's getting kind of scary how human-like it has become. People are beginning to think that it might start taking over our jobs and maybe even start writing our books. Today, I'm going to put ChatGPT's AI brilliance creativity to the test and see if that's really true. AI runs off of algorithms and can only do what it's been taught. But us as humans have more creativity and can expand and just imagine so much more than a little robot can do. So I'm about to prove that by showing you what ChatGPT does when I give it prompts to basically rewrite the first chapter of the Harry Potter book in its own idea. And hint, hint, it's not very creative. So first I found my trusty dusty book and I opened it to read the little blurb. And this is what I'm going to be typing in for my prompt. I will be changing around some of the names and words just to make sure there's not any flags for copyright. So I write the first chapter of a book, like actual chapter, full out, based off of this summary. Perry Potter had never been the star of a Quidditch team, scoring points while riding a broom far above the ground. He knows no spells, has never helped to hatch a dragon, and has never worn a cloak of invisibility. All he knows is a miserable life with the Pursleys, his horrible aunt and uncle, and their abominable son, Pudley, a great big swollen spoiled bully. Perry's room is a tiny closet at the foot of the stairs, and he hasn't had a birthday present in 11 years. But all of that is about to change when a mysterious letter arrives by Owl Messenger. A letter with an invitation to an incredible place that Harry, and anyone who reads about him, will find unforgettable. For it's there that he finds not only friends, aerial sports, and magic, and everything from classes to meals, but a great destiny that's been waiting for him, if Perry can survive the encounter. Now let's see what this little AI brain will come up with based solely on this summary. I didn't even tell him what the book is from, which it probably can figure it out, but we'll see. Okay, so this is what it did. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Cupboard. Okay, so already, how are you starting this the same exact way that the regular book does? Can you get a little more creative, man? Anyway, Perry Potter woke before the alarm clock, though he had never owned one. The house was quiet in that heavy, suffocating way. It always was before morning fully arrived, before the pipes began their groaning, and before Aunt Petula's heels started clicking sharply against the kitchen floor like a warning bell. Okay, also, I didn't name Aunt Petunia Aunt Petula, so it's kind of just going with the off-brandedness. Oh, okay. Keep going. He lay still, staring at the underside of the stairs just inches above his face. A spider crawled along the wood, dragging one delicate leg after another as if it had all the time in the world. Perry watched it carefully. The spider didn't rush. It didn't panic. It simply moved forward, steady and certain. Perry envied it. Okay, so we're talking to a spider. I guess that's a little different, but he does talk to spiders later on. But that's not this book. Anyway, his room, if anyone could call it that, was barely large enough to stretch out in. The cupboard smelled faintly of dust and something older, something like forgotten things. The walls pressed in on him, and every time he shifted, the floor creaked loud enough to make him freeze. If Uncle Vorn heard him awake early, he'd find a reason to be angry about it. Okay, same thing here. We're just ripping off Uncle Vernon for Vorn. So creative. Anyway, Perry rolled onto his side and pulled his blanket tighter around himself. It was thin and scratchy and didn't do much to keep out the cold that crept through the floorboards. He had long since stopped wishing for a better one. Wishes didn't work here. Nothing did. A thunderous bang echoed from upstairs. Perry flinched. "Boy!" Uncle Vorn's voice boomed through the house, shaking the walls. Perry stumbled out from under the blanket and shoved the cupboard door open just as another crash followed. "I'm up," Perry called, his voice cracking slightly. "You'd better be," Aunt Petula shrieked. "Breakfast won't make itself, you useless thing." Perry slipped out into the hallway, blinking against the sudden brightness. The light always felt too harsh after the dim cupboard, like stepping into a world that didn't quite want him. The kitchen was already chaos. Aunt Petula stood at the stove, her narrow face twisted in irritation as she stirred something violently in the pot. Uncle Warren sat at the table, red-faced and puffing, his mustache twitching as he read the newspaper like it had personally offended him. And then there was Pudley. Pudley Pursley sat sprawled across 2 chairs, stuffing his face with toast and jam. His cheeks bulged and crumbs clung stubbornly to his chin. He looked up when Perry entered, his small eyes lighting up with delight. "Oi," Pudley said, grinning. "The cupboard rat's awake." Okay, that's actually funny, so, good job there. Perry didn't respond. He had learned long ago that silence was safer. "Don't just stand there," Aunt Petula snapped without turning around. "Get the bacon cooking, and don't burn it this time or you'll wish you had." Perry moved quickly, grabbing the pan and setting it on the stove. His hands worked automatically. He knew exactly how Aunt Petula liked things, how Uncle Warren would complain if anything was slightly off, how Pudley would throw a tantrum if his food wasn't piled high enough. It was easier not to think about it. The smell of bacon filled the kitchen, rich and warm, though Perry knew he wouldn't get any. He never did. Pudley leaned back in his chair, watching Perry with a lazy sort of amusement. "It's my birthday tomorrow," he said, as if Perry had somehow forgotten. Perry said nothing. "I'm getting 37 presents," Pudley continued proudly. "Mom says I might get more if I ask nicely." Okay, again, why are we copying what happens in the book? I didn't even tell you that happened in the book and you're still doing it. "Of course you will, darling," Aunt Petula cooed, her voice suddenly sweet. "You deserve the very best." Perry flipped the bacon, careful not to let it sizzle too loudly. 37 presents. He tried to remember the last time he had gotten one. He couldn't. Uncle Warren folded his newspaper with a sharp snap. "Boy," he said, glaring over the table, "you better not cause any trouble tomorrow. We've got plans." "I won't," Perry said quickly. "You never do anything right," Uncle Warren muttered. "Wouldn't trust you as far as I could throw you." Kind of funny, because, Harry's he's a whittle boy. Anyway, Pudley snorted. Perry kept his eyes on the pan. Outside, something fluttered past the window. He didn't notice it at first. It was just a flicker of movement, quick and pale against the morning sky. But then it came again, closer this time. A bird. No, an owl. Perry frowned slightly. Owls didn't come around here, not in the middle of the day. The owl swooped down, wings spread wide, and landed on the windowsill with a soft thump. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The owl tilted its head, its golden eyes fixed directly on Perry. Then it tapped the glass. Once, twice. Perry stared at it, his heart beginning to pound. "Boy," Aunt Petula barked, "what are you staring at? The bacon's burning." Perry jerked his attention back to the stove, flipping the strips quickly. The moment broke like a snapped thread. When he dared glance back at the window, the owl was gone. He swallowed. "Sorry," he muttered. "Sorry doesn't fix anything," Uncle Warren grumbled. Perry finished cooking in silence, his mind lingering on the owl. It had looked at him, not just at the house, at him. That had never happened before. Nothing unusual ever happened to Perry Hodder. At least, not anything good. Okay, so right here, I guess is something a little different, because even in the books, there were a lot of unusual things that happened with Harry. He jumped on a building or something when he was running away from Dudley's friends, so a little variation, I guess. We'll keep going. But as he carried the plates to the table, something strange stirred in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear. It wasn't quite hope either. It was something in between. Something waiting. And though Perry didn't know it yet, the owl would be back. And next time, it wouldn't leave empty-handed. Okay, so that's its first chapter. not gonna lie, like, the writing isn't terrible, at least I don't think so, but definitely there are some things in there that, for one, very copycat-like. Can you have an original idea, man? We're copying the same kind of setup, even though the actual Harry Potter book, I think, starts with Uncle Vernon's perspective. We still are, we're trapped in the box, man. Like, AI's trapped in the phone, is trapped in the box. Your imagination is never leaving that little square, bruh. So now I'm going to try to reword the prompt to see if the AI can actually come up with something a little bit more original. So here is my new prompt. Write the first chapter of a book about a boy named Perry Hodder who lives in an emotionally abusive household until he gets a letter explaining that he is actually a wizard and will attend a boarding school to learn magic. So basically, I just reworded the blurb and didn't include as much information. And hopefully it'll try to be a little more unique, but you can already see that we're starting in the cupboard again, and I didn't even include the cupboard in my prompt. So let me read to you what our little robot friend wrote. Chapter 1, The Cupboard That Listened. Perry Hodder had learned at a very young age that silence was safer than sound. Sound led to questions. Questions led to blame, and blame, in the Pursley household, always found its way back to him. So Perry stayed quiet. He lived in the cupboard beneath the stairs, a narrow, crooked space that smelled faintly of dust and old shoes. It wasn't meant for a person, of course. It was meant for things that didn't matter, winter coats, broken umbrellas, forgotten junk. That made it perfect for Perry. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling that slanted so low he could touch it without stretching. The wood above him creaked with every heavy step from upstairs, and he had gotten good at recognizing who was walking by the sound alone. Okay, so the beginning kind of sounds off. Like, he lay on his thin mattress. Like, are you trying to say he'd lay or he laid? Normally they don't really make mistakes like that with the AI, so something sounds wrong with that to me. And we're really focusing a lot on his abuse, I guess, because of what the prompt was. It was more focusing on how Harry is not happy with his life because, his family's kind of rude. Anyway, we can keep going. Heavy, deliberate stops, Uncle Vernon. Okay, so in here, we're not changing the names like in the other one, but I never told what the names were, so it's definitely cheating off Harry Potter right now. Quick, sharp steps, Aunt Petunia. A loud, careless thud that rattled the ceiling, Dudley. Perry closed his eyes. It was morning, which meant in approximately 3 minutes, Aunt Petunia would open the cupboard door without knocking, flick on the light, and start telling him everything he had already done wrong before he had even gotten out of bed. He counted in his head. 1, 2, 3. The cupboard door swung open. Still in bed? Aunt Petunia's voice cut through the dim light like a knife. Honestly, Perry, I don't know what we're gonna do with you. Dudley's already been up for half an hour. Perry sat up quickly. I'll be out in a second. Well, you should have been out 5 minutes ago. So already there are some differences because I feel like Dudley would be the one who would literally sleep till like noon and just be playing video games and stuff. So there is a slight difference. Not entirely copying. We can keep going though. She didn't wait for a response. She never did. The door slammed shut again, leaving the echo behind like a warning. Perry exhaled slowly. He got dressed in the same clothes he wore nearly every day. Hand-me-downs from Dudley, stretched and faded in all the wrong places. The sleeves hung too long, the pants too loose. He looked like someone who didn't quite belong in his own life, which, to be fair, felt accurate. Okay, right here we actually are going back to copying the actual book, man. You can think of something else that is, like, abusive. I never said that Dudley was even bigger than Harry. I never even said that there was Dudley in this. So, man, you really can't think outside that box, can you? Okay, let's keep going. Breakfast was already on the table when he entered the kitchen. So apparently he doesn't have to make breakfast this time. Dudley sat in his usual spot, shoveling spoonfuls of cereal into his mouth like he was trying to win a race no one else had agreed to. Uncle Vernon hid behind a newspaper, occasionally grunting in disapproval at something Perry couldn't see. Aunt Petunia stood by the stove, her lips pressed thin. She's always doing that in the regular book. Why are we copying the little things too? Maybe she wanted her lips pressed wide in this book, whatever that means, you know? But no, it has to be thin. Like in the actual book. Be different. Be unique. Be you, Tuffle. Anyway, you're late, she said without turning around. Perry glanced at the clock. He wasn't, but correcting her had never gone well before. Sorry. You always are, she continued. If you put even half as much effort into being useful as you do into being difficult. I said I'm sorry, Perry muttered before he could stop himself. The room froze. Okay, end freeze. Uncle Vernon lowered his newspaper. Dudley paused mid-bite. Aunt Petunia turned slowly, her eyes narrowing in a way that made Perry wish she could disappear entirely. So right now, it's kind of seeming that Aunt Petunia is the antagonist. Like, she's seeming even more mean than the rest of the family, which, I know, I feel like it's supposed to be more, like, evenly distributed. So right now, we're going for evil stepmother, Cinderella. Not really stepmother, but you know, you get the point. Evil Auntie Petunia. Okay, let's keep going. What did you say? Perry swallowed. Nothing. That's what I thought. She set a plate in front of Dudley. Perfectly cooked eggs, golden and warm. Then she placed a single piece of dry toast in front of Perry. Breakfast, apparently. Okay, like, not complaining. Toast for breakfast, just, like, by itself, it's pretty good. But I would be a little mad if, you know, my fat cousin got a whole course meal right there. But that's not that abusive. Like, at least he's getting to eat. Because in the book, they, like, starved him sometimes. Anyway, let's keep going. School wasn't much better. Oh, we're talking about school. Now, that's new. You're thinking out of the box a little bit, man. Thank you. Thank you. If home was a place where Perry was invisible until he did something wrong, school was where he was visible only for the same reason. Watch it, freak. A shoulder slammed into him as he walked down the hallway, sending his books tumbling to the floor. Laughter followed. It always did. Okay, this is kind of like stereotypical high school stuff. Like, are we in a high school musical right now? Are we going to start singing some songs? We'll see. Perry knelt to pick them up, ignoring the heat crawling up his neck. It wasn't just that people were mean. It was that strange things happened around him. Unexplainable things. Okay, so now we're going back to, in the book, the regular one. It did talk about how strange things always happen to him, and in ChatGPT's first attempt, it said nothing unusual ever happened, so at least we are switching things up a little bit. We'll see what these strange things are. So, once when a teacher had accused him of cheating on a test he hadn't even studied for, all the answers on his paper had changed, right in front of her eyes, until they were all correct. Now, actually, that's kind of cool. I could just be like, paper, be correct, give me 100. So that's a little different, unique. I like that. Another time, Dudley had chased him up a tree, and Perry had somehow ended up on the roof instead. He didn't remember climbing. He just was there. Now, this is sounding pretty similar to what actually happened. I think in the book, he ended up on the school roof, if I'm remembering right. It was something like that, so that one's not as unique. Things like that made people look at him differently, like he was something broken, or worse, like he was something dangerous. Yeah, man, you kind of are dangerous, but you'll find out later, honey. Perry hugged his books closer to his chest, because, those are the only things that love him, so he's hugging them. He didn't understand. He just knew it always got him in trouble. So there was a little variation there. I liked including some stuff at school. I think that's interesting. But it's still copying so much from the regular book, because if you look at the information I gave it, I didn't give it the names such as like Petunia, Vernon, Dudley. Like, I didn't talk about him living in a cupboard, and I didn't talk about really anything besides the fact that he is emotionally abused, but one day finds out by letter that he's a wizard. So let's keep going and see if it gets a little more imaginative. When he got home that afternoon, something was different. It wasn't loud or obvious, just off. The house felt quieter than usual, tense, like it was holding its breath. Aunt Petunia stood in the hallway, staring at something in her hands. Uncle Vernon hovered beside her, his face an alarming shade of red. Dudley peeked over the banister from upstairs. "What is it?" Dudley asked. "Nothing," Uncle Vernon snapped. Perry stepped closer, curiously tugging at him despite every instinct telling him not to get involved. That's when he saw it. A letter. Okay, so now we're kind of back on track with the regular book, and to be fair, I did say that he does get a letter to find out that he's a wizard, so that's acceptable, but let's see if it kind of changes things up or if we go the same sort of direction. Not unusual on its own, except for the fact that it had his name on it. Perry Hodder, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Private Drive. Okay, dude, this is literally copyright right here. How are you even doing this? This is copying it. Because one time I was trying to generate pictures of what the Harry Potter characters would look like if they were based off of the book. And it kept saying, like, this is a copyright thing. I can't do it. But we're able to just, like, do this. Okay. You little copycat. You hypocrite. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading. His stomach dropped. He hesitated. That's mine. Uncle Vernon's head snapped toward him. No, it isn't. It has my name. I said it isn't, Uncle Vernon roared, crumpling the letter in his fist. Aunt Petunia looked pale. Vernon, maybe we should just... No. His voice was firm. Final. We are not discussing this. Perry stared at the crushed paper. Something inside him shifted. Not fear. Not exactly. Something sharper. Why can't I have it? He asked quietly. Uncle Vernon stepped forward, towering over him. Because it's not meant for you. But it says, I don't care what it says, Uncle Vernon thundered. You don't get letters, you don't get anything. Do you understand me? So now we're seeing a little bit more of the abuse coming from Uncle Vernon, like how he's being mean, because we were only seeing it from Petunia. And this does match the book because Vernon was the one who really did not want any magic involved at all. No word of it. So we're kind of shifting back to how the book actually goes, but maybe there's still some hope for you. Maybe we can change it up. The words hit harder than they should have. You don't get anything. Perry nodded slowly, even though something in his chest was starting to burn. Good, Uncle Vernon said, tossing the crumpled letter into the fireplace. Now go to your cupboard. Perry didn't move right away. He watched the letter catch fire, the edges curling as the flames consumed it. For a second, just a second, he thought he saw something strange. The fire flickered unnaturally, as if it didn't quite know what to do with the paper, as if the letter didn't want to burn. Okay, so that's a little bit different, but does this letter have feelings? Maybe in this Perry Hodder universe, paper is alive, has emotions, or we're just being metaphorical and just imaginative. Maybe you're doing something, I don't know. We can keep going though. Then it was gone. Cupboard. Now. Perry turned and walked away. Okay, now we have another one of these new scenes. We've changed scenes so many times in the first chapter. I don't really know why we're doing that. I guess we'll keep going. Not gonna question you much more, GPT. Anyway, that night he couldn't sleep. The cupboard felt smaller than usual, the air thicker. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over again. A letter. For him. No one had ever written to him before. Not once. Which meant someone, somewhere, knew he existed. The thought was almost unbearable. A soft tapping sound broke the silence. Perry sat up. Tap, tap, tap. He frowned. It was coming from outside. He crept to the tiny vent near the top of the cupboard wall and stood on his toes to peer through it. There is a vent in the cupboard? Okay. I have a cupboard under my stairs, and we don't have a vent in there, so you got some high-class stuff going on, boy. Quit complaining. Anyway, the sky was dark, but something moved against it. A shape. Wings. And then another tap. Something slid through the vent and landed softly on the floor behind him. Perry turned slowly. There, resting on the thin carpet, was a letter. Perfectly intact, untouched by fire. Addressed once again to him. Perry Hodder. His hand trembled as he picked it up. This time, no one was there to stop him. He stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then, very carefully, he opened it. Okay, so the major differences I've seen in this chapter is one from earlier, that Perry is actually at school and shares some of his experiences, and right now it actually is different because if you remember in the book, Harry didn't get to even really read his letter on his own. He didn't get to look at it until Hagrid, I think, gave it to him, which this was a series of all these letters coming everywhere. So instead, we're kind of getting a secret moment where he's going to find out by himself. And even though that is different from how the book actually goes, I 100% prefer the letter fiascos because it's just hilarious how it just keeps happening and it's driving Uncle Vernon insane. But we will give you some credit, GPT, for trying to be a little bit different. But final verdict, you copied the book way too much. Like, if I gave that prompt to someone who's never read the Harry Potter books, they're not gonna come up with this because you just copied the book, bruh. Okay, so I'm going to give ChatGPT one more chance to try to be a little bit more unique and give him a different prompt. And this is me basically explaining the book but badly, and see how it goes. So I wrote, write the first chapter of a book about an orphan boy just trying to go to school while some bald, noseless freak has a strange obsession with him and won't leave him alone. And if you read the little response that the AI gave, it's like this whole time he knows, or I guess you don't have a gender, but it knows that it has not been original because it's talking about, fine, I'll make it original enough not to get sued into oblivion. Why didn't you do that in the first place? What if you got sued the other 2 times before, which, your people who made you would be very upset with you. So you get some redemption maybe, we'll see. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Just Wanted a Normal Monday. Okay, I actually like that title. To me, it kind of is like sounding like a Percy Jackson chapter, or if you've read a Rouge Shaw, just like the chapter title and being goofy. So maybe this will be a little different. Anyway, Perry Hodder did not expect much from life. This wasn't because he lacked imagination or ambition. It was because every time he did expect something, like a quiet morning, or a normal school day, or a breakfast that wasn't slightly expired, it went spectacularly wrong. Take this morning, for example. Evan stood in the cramped kitchen of his aunt's house, staring at a piece of toast that had somehow managed to be both burnt and cold. His aunt, who had perfected the art of disappointment as a personality trait, was already yelling at something, possibly him. Possibly the universe. So who's Evan? Is Evan like quote unquote Dudley, or I don't know, we'll see. Eat it or don't, she snapped, turning around. We're not made of money. Evan took a bite. It tasted like regret. Okay, so it kind of sounds like Evan is Perry Hodder. He has a third name, Perry Hodder and Evan. Well, that's a little weird. I don't like that. That's confusing. But anyway, maybe there's a reason for this. I'm trying to give you some hope, man. I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but what are you doing? Anyway, from the living room came the sound of his cousin, Darren. Okay, so obviously Evan's not the cousin, because Darren is. Darren. Anyway, Darren's laughing at something loud on the stupid TV. Darren had the unique gift of being deeply irritating without putting any visible effort. Yeah, I know a lot of people like that. Anyway, Evan grabbed his backpack and slipped out the door before anyone could invent a new reason to blame him for something. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. For a brief moment, walking down the cracked sidewalk towards school, things almost felt normal. That was, unfortunately, when the whispering started. Perry. Okay, so, what's more abnormal? The fact that you hear someone whispering the name Perry, or the fact that I can't figure out what the heck your name is? Is it Evan or Perry? Make up your mind. Unless your name's Perry Evan Hodder, which sounds stupid. Or is it Evan Perry Hodder? Okay, we'll just keep going. He froze. It wasn't loud. It never was. Just soft enough to make him question whether he'd actually heard it. He turned slowly. Nobody. So he's seeing things, It's kind of reminding me, like in the third book, when he kept thinking he was seeing the Grimm. But, it was just Sirius being a little puppy dog. But so we have the feeling someone's watching him. He feels someone's watching him. Maybe we'll see where this goes. Just an empty street, a flickering street light, and a stray piece of paper skittering along the pavement like it had somewhere to be. Perry exhaled. Great, he muttered. Starting early today. He kept walking. The thing is, the voice had been happening more often lately. At first, it was easy to ignore. Everyone hears things sometimes, right? Stress, lack of sleep, questionable nutrition. His life was basically a checklist of bad decisions he didn't even make. So it's kind of sounding like this whispering that's going on is similar to the pain in Harry's scar, which he gets later in the actual books. So, hearing voices versus his scar hurting, which, he does hear snake voices, but we'll see how this goes. But then came the dreams. A tall figure standing in the distance, watching. Always watching. So dreams, are a little bit familiar that we've seen them in the Harry Potter book, but they're also across a lot of books. So maybe we're going to take a turn and see it in a different light. Maybe you're trying to change perspectives going on. Okay, we'll see what the dream is. No face, just smooth, pale skin where a nose should have been, like someone had started sculpting a person and then lost interest halfway through. Okay, and that's pretty good. Imagine just going up to Voldemort being like, are you a sculpture? But your sculptor, forgot to give you a nose? Burn. Okay, that's not that tough, but whatever. Evan had never seen anything like it before. Here we are talking about Evan again. Who the heck is Evan? Which was exactly why he couldn't stop thinking about it. By the time he reached school, the normal chaos of teenagers arguing, laughing, and pretending to care about algebra swallowed him whole. Hey, Thorn, someone shouted from across the hall. Perry didn't bother turning around. Okay, wait, hold up. Are we calling him Thorn now? Because, Perry didn't bother turning around because, obviously that means that they're talking to him. Is he Evan, Thorn, Perry, Harry, Potter? I don't know anymore. I guess we'll keep reading, but, GPT, man, you gotta make up your mind. Anyway, it was either an insult or a request to copy homework. Both required energy he didn't have. Real. He slipped into his first class and took his usual seat near the back. The teacher droned on about something that might have been important in another lifetime. For a while, things settled. No whispers, no strange feelings, just the comforting boredom of a normal school day. Evan almost let himself relax. And then the lights flickered. Once, twice, The classroom went silent. Oh, we're so dramatic right now, The flickering of the lights. Oh, what's going to happen? Is the noseless man going to eat our Evan or Perry or Thorn, whatever the heck your name is? He probably wouldn't even know to kill who you're trying to kill because this guy is the man of many names. You're going to be like, hey, you Perry? No, actually, I'm not. I'm also go by this. And so he, whatever. Now keep reading. Probably just a power issue, the teacher said a little too quickly. Perry's stomach tightened, because while everyone else looked confused, he felt something. What, are you feeling the epiphany that, you don't have a singular name to go by? You're just a man of whatever many names, your whole life is a lie? Okay, is that what you're feeling? Or maybe not. I would be questioning that at that point, man. Maybe that's why you're weird. Anyway, I'll keep going. Not heard, not seen, felt. Like someone had just walked over his grave, except he wasn't dead yet, which felt like a technicality at this point. The air grew colder, and then right behind him, found you. Perry spun around so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Nothing. Just the same classroom, same students, same terrible lighting. A few people stared at him. You good, dude? Someone asked. Perry forced a laugh that convinced absolutely no one. Yeah, just thought I dropped something. He turned back around slowly. His hands were shaking, because for the first time, the voice hadn't sounded distant. It had sounded close. Okay, yeah, so this book is actually going very different from the normal Harry Potter books, so I will give it that, and I am kind of intrigued besides the fact that you can't seem to get the name right, and there are some other things in there, I find that ChatGPT uses a lot of similes, and, the writing, it's something off, it's not like a normal book that I would read. It's not terrible, but it's definitely different from a normal book. Anyway, the rest of the day passed in a blur of half-hearted lectures and constant glances over his shoulder. By the time the final bell rang, Perry was more than ready to get out. He pushed through the front doors and into the fading afternoon light. Home. Homework. Another exciting evening of pretending everything was fine. He had almost made it to the sidewalk when the crowd parted. Not dramatically like in a movie, just subtly. People shifting without realizing why. In there, standing across the street, was the figure from his dreams. Tall. Still watching him. Up close, it was worse. No nose, no expression, just empty, pale skin stretched too smoothly across a face that didn't quite look human. Okay, so yeah, our noseless friend again. Hey. He's probably not even a bad guy. He just wants to know why this little boy has 50 million names. It's just too much. I would be confused too. I might stalk someone if they had that many names. I don't know. Anyway, Perry's breath caught. Nobody else reacted. Cars passed, people talked, life went on. Like this thing wasn't even there. The figure tilted his head slightly. Curious, interested, obsessed. Perry took a step back. The figure smiled, which would have been less horrifying if it actually had a nose to go with it. Can we stop, face shaming? What if he was in an accident and he doesn't have a nose because of that? Leave this poor, noseless, pale guy alone. We'll keep going. Perry Potter, it said softly, though its mouth barely moved. Why are we calling it it? It's a man. Leave him alone. Call him a he. It's not an object. It is a being. I've been looking for you. Perry swallowed. Cool, he said, because panic apparently made him stupid. Well, you found me, so you can stop it now. That's also giving Percy Jackson to me. Anyway, the thing's smile widened. I don't think you understand. It took a step forward. Perry took 2 steps back. What, are we waltzing right now? Doing some kind of 2-step, I don't know, little boogie? Whatever. I just want to go to school, Perry said, his voice cracking in a way he would absolutely hate himself for later. That's it. That's my whole thing. The figure stopped. For a moment, it seemed to consider that. And then it laughed. A quiet, cold sound that didn't belong in the world. Okay, so now we're judging his laugh? Well, leave this guy alone. He just wants to know what the heck is going on with your name crisis. Oh, it said, that's not going to be possible. Perry's stomach dropped because something told him this was just the beginning of a very, very bad week. Yeah, because, maybe ever thought about that this poor old guy just wants to sit down with you for lunch and talk about why you have so many names, and maybe you have some psychological trauma going on in there, or your parents, I don't know. He's trying to figure you out, man, and you're just being mean. You're being mean to him. Okay, that's just one theory, but yeah, we'll see. ChatGPT is probably thinking he's a bad guy, but I think you're just being plain rude. So my overall verdict on this last one is that, well, first of all, as you heard me commentating the whole time, why can't we come up with just one name for this poor little boy? So, that takes off minus 75 points because it's getting on my nerves, but you can keep the other 25 because I do like that we're not really going off of the Harry Potter books. You're actually being different. We didn't even talk about magic specifically, just an odd feeling that somebody is there, not him actually doing something unusual. And we're not talking about him living in a cupboard. We're not talking about all of these other things that have been going on. It did still know about him having a cousin and living with his aunt and uncle, but not bad. You still only get a 25 on this test, though, because you were annoying to me. And so now for my overall conclusion of the 3 documents that ChatGPT wrote, I'd have to say that while it can come up with correct sentences and structure, and it is kind of engaging, I will have to say, where is your creativity? And also, you did make some mistakes in there. And yeah, everyone makes mistakes, but if you're gonna make mistakes, at least be unique, be a human. Be human. You kind of can't do that. So anyway, in the comments, tell me which one of these you think was your favorite and you would actually read if AI made this book, which don't support AI authors because that's kind of weird. Anyway, bye.